Hello, I am Henry Borabach, host of Reef Exchanges, the podcast brought to you by the Reef Resilience Network. For over 20 years, the network has been a global leader in training marine managers and other practitioners to protect, restore, and maintain coral reefs. We do this by turning scientific information and in-the-water experience into operational knowledge, tools, and guidance. You can learn more about all of our offerings at reefresilience.org. 2025 also marks the network's 20th anniversary, which we've just been really excited about all year. And I just want to take an extra moment here to thank you, our network members, for sharing your time and your expertise with us. And of course, to celebrate the hard and important work you do day in and day out to take care of our world's marine areas. Now, without any further ado, let's dive on in. I'm joined today by my colleague, Dr. Anika Cross, Resilience Science Lead for Global Oceans at the Nature Conservancy.
Hi, everybody.
We're recording this episode for Bleaching Awareness Month, which is led by our partners at the Coral Reef Alliance and the International Coral Reef Initiative, ICRI. And Anika and I are going to be talking with Dr. Steve Schill, who is lead scientist with TNC's Caribbean division. I think we've actually both known Steve for a pretty long time. And Steve, especially since it's the network's 20th anniversary this year, as you introduce yourself, could you please also tell us a little bit about how you've encountered the network over the years?
Yes, thanks for having me on and sharing my journey with the Reef Resilience Network. It's been great working with them over the year. I joined TNC in 2003, and as the lead scientist for the Caribbean, I work with 7 offices across the Caribbean. We have about 80 staff, and one of our strategies is coral protection and restoration. And we use a lot of tools and trying to use the latest technology to answer questions about coral. And it's been great associating with the Reef Resilience Network. We've specifically been working on developing remote sensing curriculum to help reef practitioners use the technology to monitor and measure how reefs are doing. And we've also been working on some climate change refugia, looking at how coral reef managers can better manage coral in a changing world, and excited to talk about these things. So thanks for having me.
Thanks. Thanks a lot, Steve. And it's great to have this podcast episode with you and chatting with you. But before we dive into your work, I just want to set up the topic of the podcast a little bit for our listeners. And so to get us started on the topic of bleaching, I wanted to talk a little bit about what bleaching is. So for most of you listening to us, we know that when the temperatures in the oceans, the temperatures in the water get pretty high, and they stay high for a long time, 1 month, 2 months, corals in the water start losing their symbiotic algae, and they turn all white. And if that lasts too long, then they die, and that's called coral bleaching. And so ever since we've had our first bleaching event, it's been something that scientists and managers alike are trying to understand. And to do that, we need to be able to monitor the reef, understand what the reef looks like before a bleaching event, how it reacts to a bleaching event, and look at what's left after a bleaching event. And that's the topic that we're going to go in with Steve. And so just wanted to back up and give a bit of that background. And so, Steve, tell us a little bit over the years, what has been your experience with monitoring reef, and why are you now working with drones?
Yeah, so my background is remote sensing. And so I studied many years ago uh, in South Carolina, monitoring the estuarine environment. And I was working on a NASA grant, and we were monitoring smooth cordgrass and using satellites and planes. And this is right when we started getting high resolution satellite imagery. So 1 meter pixels is where I started, and now we're analyzing images that are 1 centimeter pixels. So over the years, remote sensing has been a great tool for governments that we work with. These governments, we work with 17 countries and territories across the Caribbean. They don't have many resources to invest in mapping underwater. So what we do is we use technology such as drop cameras. We want to create national maps of where their reefs are, and remote sensing has been uh, a real blessing to gather this information across really large scales. And back in 2014, I came up with this crazy idea of, how can we get into areas where we can't access with a boat? And I worked with one of my students to build a drone on a $2,000 budget back in 2014. And we wanted this drone to be able to be launched from the boat and land on the water. And it had one of those old model GoPros on it, and it had a Tupperware full of all this electronics. And that was our first entry into drone monitoring. And it worked fairly well. This drone had about a 10-minute battery life, but we were able to fly it um, and get information underwater of what habitats were there in areas where we couldn't get the boat without having to go snorkel over there. A lot of these areas were inaccessible. And so that started our journey of getting into drone monitoring. And now we operate a very large drone that's a fixed wing that has a $10,000 camera in the fuselage, and we launch this drone and it flies for an hour, and we can collect 4 square kilometers of 1 centimeter data that lets us map thousands of coral colonies. And we use uh, artificial intelligence uh, algorithms that use deep learning to be able to automatically map where these corals are, and we can detect the amount of bleaching that is going on and also track the recovery. And we've been doing a lot of this work in the USVI.
I'm really curious. Like, I think the picture I've seen of you doing this is like probably similar, more from that 2014 era, where it's like a little boat and there's a little drone flying above it.
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
How like are you? Is that are you still working from a boat, or what's the infrastructure for having that kind of drone at work?
Yeah, well, we adapt based on the situation that we're in. We're currently preparing to do some monitoring of Queen Conch in the Bahamas, and a lot of that work will be offshore, and so we'll need to operate from a boat. This larger drone, it has to be a really large boat to be able to launch and land. Um, so we just adapt and use the drone that best suits the environment and the question that we're asking. Um, that larger drone is really powerful in mapping large areas and getting the resolution that we need to extract the information to answer the question that we have, whether that's, what corals have recovered from the past bleaching event, or how many types of a certain species actually exist. We're developing libraries where we can actually map certain species, whether it's Acropora palmata, whether it's Diploria, whatever species that we can see down to about a 3 meter depth because beyond that depth, we start to get a lot of refraction in the water column, and we're not able to accurately map. So that's when photogrammetry below water comes into play, where we actually take the cameras underwater and we map in high resolution monitoring plots. But that's we're unable to do that for large areas, and so the drone really helps us to monitor the shallow reef. And the satellite imagery, we're able to see much deeper, but we're not able to map at the colony level. And that's why these technologies are complementary. We can go underwater, we can map at the 10 by 10 meter plot level. We can go above the water and we can map with the drone at a kilometer type plot area, and then we can go to the satellite and we can map across very large national scales. And all three of these scales feed information into the next level to be able to answer the question of how are coral reefs doing.
Steve, when I hear you describe all of that, I'm thinking that's a lot of data, especially when you were talking about the newer drone that can map in an hour about 4 kilometers square with 1 centimeter resolution. So I imagine that the data you're getting is not data that you would necessarily share directly with managers, but there's a lot of work to do on it. Can you tell us a little bit what that looks like and what
Yeah.
it takes to be able to do? Like, who can actually analyze that data?
Yeah, you're exactly right. It is a lot of data, and we have cameras that are able to write. This drone is flying at about 70 meters or about 200 feet above the water. It's moving very fast and it's capturing stereo TIFFs. So these TIFFs are in the order of 80 megabytes a piece, and it's writing that information. And so we're collecting thousands of these photos. What helps us to be able to process that data is we're able to upload it to a cloud processor. And we have partnerships with Drone Deploy that allow us to complete the mosaic of these really large areas in hours. And then we're able to leave it on the cloud and share that imagery. We can actually stream that imagery in to a GIS work session, and that greatly facilitates access to the data. So, so our coral managers in USVI don't need to be downloading the gigabytes and gigabytes of data. They can stream it in based on the area that they're looking at. And this allows the managers to have much greater access to this huge volume of data. And without that, it would be very difficult to be able to analyze the volume. So that's kind of how the workflow is we process it on the cloud and we serve it up from the cloud, and that allows fast access to these really high resolution mosaics.
So it sounds like maybe, let's say if there's a new team, there's managers maybe in Indonesia or in Hawaii who hear this podcast and they say, hey, we'd love to have, technology like that working for us and doing some of the monitoring for us on the more remote or inaccessible reefs that we have. Um, what what would you say to them? Like, what are some of the, you talked about a workflow, but what are some of the key ingredients for setting up a project or program like this? Like, what are the essential things that you need, including, I imagine, somebody who knows how to fly a drone?
Yeah.
But what would that look like if somebody wanted to start from scratch?
Well, you first need to start with a question. So, because the question drives the collection of data and what you're using. So how big of an area are you trying to monitor? Are you trying to monitor at the colony level? There's certain things that you can detect with a drone and certain things that you can't, such as what we talked about with the depth. if you're monitoring coral species that are beyond that 3 meter depth limit, then you need to be looking at other solutions. So, some people are monitoring invasive species. There's a project going on in Puerto Rico where we're trying to evaluate if we can detect a certain invasive species using satellite imagery. And we're using drone technology and in-water surveys to be able to see if we can detect that specific reflectance off that invasive species. So it all starts with your question. Are you trying to detect the growth of a restoration site? You've invested a lot of effort into outplanting coral, and you want to be able to monitor the growth. So that would be a combination of in-water surveys and drone surveys, because once they reach a certain size, you'll be able to detect them. You've got to investigate, how high you need to fly, what kind of camera you need, uh, and that all comes down to your budget. So you start with the question, you look at what budget you have, and you try to develop uh, the the workflow using the technology that fits within your budget. So, and there's lots of different options out there. We're currently working with several nonprofit groups that are using $500 drones, and they're using open source cloud platforms that cost $35 a month. So we're trying to develop low cost options. A lot of people think this is really expensive to get into, but flying drones is actually very easy. The technology that we live in with the GPS constellation that we have, the open source technology that allows you to plan missions and execute missions, you can actually do this very cost effectively. Now, in order to answer a specific question about resolution, you may need to invest in a higher level drone. But if you're trying to get a general idea of what's going on across a reef track, uh, a lot of these lower end drones will give you sufficient imagery to do that. So
What
yeah.
what would you need to monitor bleaching? Maybe not as it sounds like at USVI you're really looking at a big area, but what if you had a smaller area? What would you be able to do that with your $500 drone and $35 um uh,
Yeah.
cloud space to be able to monitor and know precisely which colonies are bleaching or not?
Yeah, so right now we're monitoring an area on the west side of St. Croix, and there's some fringing reefs out there, and we have a partner that we've worked with that we've trained. She has her own drone, and she goes out and she collects data monthly, and she's able to process that imagery. Another thing that's important is the geometric positioning of the imagery. So these lower cost drones don't have the geometric accuracy, but they're so when you fly an imagery and you overlay it on top of the data set that you collected the month before, there may be an offset, and there likely will be an offset of anywhere from 1 to 5 meters, because unless you invest in the more expensive drones with developing a base station that allows you to remove that positioning error, you're going to have that offset. But there are softwares out there you can use to be able to select control points and be able to align those pixels so you can do change detection over time. Um, and just to be able to get a general sense of where corals are bleaching, a $500 drone flying for 20 minutes over an area that's probably a hectare, you can collect information uh, that will cover that area, and then pay subscription to a cloud service. It's called Open Drone Map. There's a web uh, uh, subscription that you can pay for $35 a month that allows you to upload and process that data on the cloud, and then you can view the results. And so you don't have to be doing the processing on your laptop, which requires a pretty high-end processor to do that. There's solutions out there that you can upload to the cloud as long as you have a decent internet connection. You can go fly the imagery, upload it to the cloud, and get the results. And this is something that maybe we can uh, develop a curriculum on how to do this for the Reef Resiliency Network. I think there's a lot of partners out there that are interested in doing this at a low budget. So let's talk about doing that in the future.
I think that's right, Steve. It sounds like it's something that's approachable by many budgets and it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be expensive. And I think it's something that managers would find beneficial, especially as we're looking at this increase in bleaching events and in intensity. I think this helping managers make their life easier through these type of technology is definitely something we want to do.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, Steve, I know you've been working in the with coral reefs and in that field interface between remote sensing and coral reef management for quite a few years. How does this work tie in with some of your other big projects that you have at the moment?
In terms of using drones?
Oh, just in general, in terms of, I know your team and your whole program in the Caribbean is focusing on how to help reefs become more resilient, how to help managers support that and make the right decisions.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we have an amazing team in the USVI that have done a tremendous amount of effort on outplanning, trying to identify uh, different genotypes that are more resilient to bleaching, and being able to uh, provide them data to assess progress toward their objective has been really important. And over the past 2 years, uh, we've had tremendous just really high ocean temperatures in the Caribbean that we haven't seen before. A lot of anomalies in terms of sea surface temperature, and being able to find the survivors, the coral colonies that have survived these bleaching events, specifically with Acropora palmata that has been one of the main species that they've outplanted and tried to restore. We used drones. We were there in June, and we mapped very large areas using the Wingtra 1 drone with a 61 megapixel camera. We're able to cover, like I said, about 4 square kilometers at a 1 centimeter resolution. And then we process that overnight, and we're able to run these AI detection algorithms that actually look for live colonies, and providing that information is much, much more efficient and effective in finding these colonies. The alternative is sending a boat out, and you do a lot of snorkeling trying to look
Right.
for surviving colonies, and with the drone we're able to pinpoint exactly where these colonies are, and get to them, take samples to be able to go back and study these colonies. And so it's been really efficient and effective, not only to monitor the bleaching of the colonies and the recovery of the colonies, but also identifying where those surviving colonies are, and use that information for management.
Right. And I think a lot of the people working in restoration would be very interested in hearing this as well, because I imagine it really helps with sort of selecting donor colonies and thinking how to bring in some of that thermal tolerance into the mix. So yeah, that's fantastic work, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how it evolves.
Yeah, and I think I'll jump in here just because I think that's a great note to end on, and especially that note of seeing how this evolves, because it's really cool just hearing about Steve, like going from like buying a drone and like attaching a GoPro to it to having this really massive piece of high tech equipment, but that also that the technology is scaling, right? So that it still works. Like if you're sitting in a boat and you've got a little drone, you can still have that kind of rapid response that's so valuable after these bleaching events and other kinds of threats or just monitoring context. So I think that I don't know, it makes me want to go. I need to get a boat first, and then I get a drone, and then I gotta go stop living where there aren't reefs. But I'll get there. But I'm gonna make my way, just like hopefully many of our managers will as well. But yeah, so at any rate, thank you so much, Steve, for joining us. Anik, of course, it's always a blast. I love listening to y'all talk about this stuff. And thank you to all of our listeners for joining us today. As usual, you can find show notes and other episodes, as well as other resources like webinars, toolkits, and more at reefresilience.org. We're talking to Steve about getting some pictures and video of the work that he's doing to be able to upload and share as well. So you can get a sense of there is obviously a strong visual component to this for sensing as well, but we'll see about sharing that. And if you aren't already a member, please do join the Reef Resilience Network to receive notifications about all of our new resources and training opportunities, including episodes of Reef Exchanges like this one. And we'll see you then.